In this video, we're going to talk about the basic guidelines for meeting digital accessibility no matter your role in the school district. Whether you're a teacher sending out a parent square communication to families with images about all of the great things your class learned this week, or a transportation employee creating an internal email about safety procedures, including diagrams and maps. It's important that you know how to make your content meet the basic guidelines for accessibility. If you include images in your communications, emails, slides, Google Docs, you need to make sure that text alternatives for any non-text content are provided. Alternative text is text that is equivalent to an image that has content or function in a document. When you're asking yourself if something requires alt text, you might consider the following. Does the image or icon have content or function? Is there any of this information contained in nearby text? If you answered yes to either of these questions, then your image does in fact require the addition of alternative text. To generate appropriate equivalent text, ask yourself these two questions. If I remove this image from the document, what text would I add instead? What is the function of the image? When you're generating that alternative text, it's most effective when it uses just a few words, is not redundant with nearby text, and avoids phrases such as image of. One example of alternative text that does not meet is just simply adding the alternative text of lemonade to this image. When describing this to families, there's much more going on in this picture than just lemonade. An example that does meet would be children standing in a single file line, maintaining a safe distance from each other and the bus as they wait to board. Anyone listening to the alternative text of this image would have a much better understanding of the content than simply just adding one word. When you are working in Google Docs and Google Slides specifically, we want to note to avoid the use of decorative images. Decorative images are images that are not meant to convey any meaning or important information. Many content editing platforms allow creators to mark images as decorative. However, this is not an option within Google Docs. It's best to avoid using decorative images when working with Google Docs since they cannot be tagged as decorative. If any of your communications include charts, you need to make sure that you're using the same steps to access the alt text for charts as well. When you're composing the alt text for a chart, it requires different elements. The chart's title, the type of chart, and if appropriate, a summary of the chart's information needs to be provided. Additionally, you could provide a longer description of the chart in a link or text below the chart, adding to the user's understanding of what's happening in the chart. When you're placing images, it's important to consider how you do that within Google Docs or Google Slides. The best way to optimize the accessibility is to always insert images or icons in line with text. Wrap text, break text, behind text, and in front of text are all problematic for screen readers and their organization when they're reading the content to the listener. If you're adding hyperlinks within any sort of document, email, or text, it's important that you make sure you name what the hyperlink goes to. A non-example is click here to read. A good example would be read Appendix 1. You want to make sure that the text tells the listener or user what they're going to be accessing via that hyperlink. Optimized link text is descriptive, concise, unique, and visually distinct. Link text should describe the function of the text. It's also important to note that underlining should only be reserved for hyperlinked text. Color and contrast. The guideline that we must follow is to make it easier for users to see and hear content, including separating the foreground from the background. The definition of contrast is the difference in brightness between text and the background of that text. There are 7 different types of color blindness. All 7 of those are present within our school district. There are 4 red-green, 2 blue-yellow, and no ability to distinguish colors. Although that's the one that's most often thought of, all of these exist within WELD RE4. In order to make sure that your color contrast is meeting the standard, here are the steps to check. Number 1, start with a visual inspection. If it's hard for you to read, it's probably hard for someone else to read. Number 2, review with a third-party tool. We have the Grackle extension for Google Docs, Google Sheets, and Google Slides. WebAIM Contrast Checker is another appropriate tool, and the Color Contrast Analyzer is another great checker. Here's a graphic to describe why avoiding color reliance is important. On the right-hand side, if I were to just provide that list to someone who experiences a red-green colorblind scenario, this list might be dangerous. On the left-hand side, if I split it up and use text descriptors and the use of color, this becomes much more accessible to all of my audiences. For ongoing support, you can join our web content accessibility course by visiting tinyurl/weldaccessibility. You'll have access to all of the resources in today's video and more. Additionally, we have a Google Docs and Google Slides web content accessibility checklist to help you repair any of your documents that might not be in compliance yet.